In 32 years, over 70 million liters of crude oil have been spilled. Over 100,000 liters of toxic waste has been poured directly into the rivers. 1 million hectares of forest have been cleared, and over 235 million cubic meters of gas have been burnt in the open air, affecting a population of 300,000 indigenous peoples. Many of them now suffer from everything from skin diseases to cancer, as well as all the viruses brought by the white men: smallpox, measles, whooping cough, plague, typhus, dysentery, flu. Rocío Alarcón is an ethnobotanist who has spent many years fighting to defend the interests of the indigenous tribes.
Obviously, behind oil companies, behind wood companies, there are human groups belonging to this country who look for new alternatives and come to settle these lands. And the laws, the state, with its slowness, taking decisions, or with its contradictory laws, has provoked that the Guarani lose more and more land every day. They lose their habitat and therefore their knowledge.
The network of bridges and roads built by the multinationals meant this once impenetrable territory became accessible. The oil attracted people from every corner of the country in search of a better life. Davo is Ñame and Vara's oldest son, but they have had no news of him for many years. He and his wife decided to leave the forest, attracted by money and the oil companies. He has still not been able to adapt to this new way of life, and he feels lost between two worlds. His only escape is alcohol.
I thought I was coming to paradise. My friends, the timber merchants, told me stories about the oil companies. They convinced me to come here to work, saying I would earn a lot of money. But I didn't, and now I regret leaving the jungle. Every single day I think about how I used to hunt with my father and all my brothers, all of us naked. I was very happy. Now I realize that paradise is not this, but what I left behind. Now it's too late.
Davo is not the only Guarani who left the jungle. Many, like him, decided to start a new life and seek their fortunes, but few have been able to adapt. Their culture has lost its identity and pride to such an extent that they've now become beggars in the midst of the wealth of their own territory. They beg for charity while their houses are built on enormous reserves of oil.
The change is very pronounced. The old people have hidden their knowledge. They have hidden the way they are. And you need to spend time and energy getting to them and getting to know their real inner world, which is covered, blocked by the current meaning of civilization. Regarding the young people, they feel attracted to the concept of the city, modernism, radio, television. We, the Ecuadorians, and the world around us, all of us who are part of this planet, who are hungry for natural resources, hungry for oil, hungry for a series of nature's products. We have brought about this change. We are the ones who have made this happen through oil, wood, and drug companies, and of course us, the consumers.
The older members seem resigned, but what future lies ahead for the younger generations?
I think the Guarani are still in time to develop a protective strategy by means of two lines. Protection of the ancestral knowledge, but that goes hand in hand with protection of the forest. Supplying alternatives for them to become capable and to be able to enter into the modern world, but in a slower and safer way. Because within 50 years, they have had a change that goes from the stone to civilization to the computer.
Many young Indian women have no alternative but to work in the many brothels on the outskirts of Kaka, the town closest to the Wairani territory. Kaka lies on the left bank of the Napo River and is a typical city of the Amazon, remote and forgotten, a place of unplanned, chaotic growth. At first sight, the town looks poor, but this could not be further from the truth. Money flows like water here. Brothels, bars, casinos, hotels, and restaurants exist thanks to the petrol workers who spend months at a time isolated in the heart of the jungle. Then there are the timber merchants, the miners, and the many soldiers who are here to protect the oil plants.
There was no other access way to Kaka than coming by the river. We had to depart from Quito to Ambato, and from Ambato to Baños, Cuyo, Tena, and Sauail. We took the canoe from there, and we came to Kaka. We departed at about 11 a.m. and arrived at Kaka at 4 or 5 p.m. It was the only way. Sometimes we did not arrive in Kaka, and we had to sleep at any point of the riverside in the house of some settler. Napo River divided two areas, the side of the native settlers who were here on the left hand, and on the right hand, all these lands from the Misaguayi to Nuevo Rocafuerte. That entire riverside belonged to the Aucas people. There was not a house, there was not a town along the whole route, because if anybody dared to pass, he risked to find death. Women were not often killed. They were taken to be raped, but men were killed. I remember that in that time, when we were here, the Aucas appeared naked on the other side of the river, and there was a small picket of soldiers, a squad, and we begged them to go and frighten the Aucas, to fire into the air. But they always left. That is why we always lived without rest, because sometimes the Aucas managed to cross to this riverside.
Kaka is also the distribution center for the raw materials the drug dealers need to make cocaine, and the off-duty meeting place of the FARC, the Colombian guerrillas whose headquarters is just across the border. The streets of Kaka have the feel of a wild, remote frontier. The town never sleeps. For many, gambling, alcohol, and the cheapest prostitutes in Ecuador provide their only safety valve, the only way to make life bearable so far away from any civilization. Kaka has several founders. In Jesuit times, it was called San Antonio de la Coca. Later settlements were founded by an Ecuadorian, and both were to be found on the left bank of the Napo River, where it flows into the Coca River. This foundation is dated to about 1954 and was the work of a Capuchin monk called Camilo de Torano, who arrived here when there were just 3 little houses in the area. It was then that some activities began to work around the mission. It had a little school, a clinic, and a small group of people began to group themselves around the mission area. But when the oil came, that was when Kaka really began to grow. But even before the arrival of the oil companies, the Wairani had already come into contact with the white men. At the start of the 50s, the ILV, a North American evangelical mission, began to fly over the jungle trying to find and establish contacts with the indigenous tribes in an ambitious evangelization project. They showed their intentions were friendly by throwing gifts from the air. The Wairani were brought into protectorates, where they underwent a brutal process of westernization. This was the start of cultural genocide, but also the birth of a myth which continues to this day. A group of around 50 Guarani decided to remain free and moved even deeper into the jungle. They made a blood pact among themselves, never again to have contact with anyone. Their leader was called Taga, and in his honor they named themselves the Tagaeri. The Tagaeri occupied an area of the jungle extremely rich in oil, and soon they had to fight against the oil companies. In order to avoid a bloodbath, Alejandro Lavaca, a Spanish Capuchin missionary, decided to risk his life and contact the Tagaeri in order to seek a solution to the conflict. On the 21st of July 1987, the missionary and the nun Inés Arango were killed by the spears of the Tagaeri.